Check, 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 check.
I think our mics are on. I think our mics are on.
Hit them?
It's definitely lighting up.
Yeah, but it should be coming through that too. Check, check, check.
Maybe that only YouTube can hear us.
What?
Said maybe that only YouTube can hear. Oh, there we go. Now everyone can hear us.
Check, check,
Now everyone can definitely
check,
hear us.
check, 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 check.
We might want to do that for all four mics. The three of you, make sure that your sound levels are okay.
Hello.
Hello?
Okay.
You can actually talk into it.
I did. Can you not hear me?
This
Yeah.
is this working? Yeah, it should be. Yeah.
Check, mic check. Mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check. If you turn that up, turn this. Mic check, 1, 2. Check.
Are you all good? Hello, group. I think we're going to get started now. Can everybody hear okay? Mic volume's good back there? Yes, no, maybe, good, cool. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our talk, Generative AI for Security Awareness Training, Skills, Strategies, and Accountability. You all probably remember me. I was up here. I was standing last time, but I was up here last month. But I brought other people with me because why should I have to stand up here all by myself when I have other people who can do it with me? So we're going to talk to you today about a semester, about 2.5 months worth of research that we've been doing in my research lab. If we can get to the next slide. Uh-oh, how do we get to the next slide? There we go.
Okay, so some questions that we want everybody to just keep in mind while we're talking are, what is the future of developing security awareness training? And what skills might your company be missing to maximize your training's effectiveness? And how can we hold ourselves accountable when using tools such as generative AI to help create trainings? And what recommendations and strategies should you take back to your business to help rethink how to use generative AI for human-facing security tasks? I'm an information technology and web science major under the information security focus track, and I'm currently working on 2 research projects, this one and a quantum processing for generative AI project, in which we developed a part of speech predictor for a small LLM using quantum machine learning. And I participated in the NCL last semester, and I'm doing so again this semester.
Hi, my name is Sanya. I'm a sophomore CS and ITWS dual major, and I'm on the Web Technologies and Information Security focus track, and I've been working on this project this semester.
Hi, I'm Sari. I'm a senior in information technology and web science. I also participated in the National Cyber League last semester and the year before, and I am participating in this research here.
All right, and I'm the boss, so it's always nice to be the boss. So they're all working in my research lab doing these projects. For those of you who are not here last month, I'm a professor at RPI. I do cybersecurity at RPI. I'm the director of our little research lab that runs their cybersecurity collaboratory. If you were here last month, you heard me talk you all probably to death about OpenBSD, a security project that is near and dear to my heart as a very long time developer for that project. All of them who play in the NCL, I am their coach. Last semester, we celebrated being the #1 ranked school in the country. They're all very modest about their actual successes in CTFs. And like I said, you might recognize me because I stood up here last month and figured I might as well bring some other people with me. So just to kind of set up the talk itself, we're going to talk a little bit about the origins and background of this project, kind of where we came from, how we landed on working on this project. Then we'll turn our attention to how we worked through some questions and ultimately developed the experiment that we ran on campus. We'll talk a little bit about the preliminary results that we have, and then we'll wrap it up with ideas for what we'll need to do going forward for future work and kind of things, actionable items that you can take with you tonight. So a little bit about the origins and backgrounds. I actually began working on a project like this actually back in the previous semester. I was working with an MBA student, and she was very interested in understanding if people could tell the difference between cybersecurity awareness training that was developed by a human or one that was awkwardly and poorly developed by an AI. And does anyone want to give us a spoiler alert? What do you think we learned? Can people do it? No, they cannot. They had no idea. My favorite moment in the whole project last semester, we had a person who works for .cio, which is RPI's IT services, who I'm pretty sure works like, if not on the security team, pretty close to the security team. And we showed them fake RPI policy about security, and they were like, yeah, that's obviously our policy. That totally makes sense. So even the people who like should be near and dear to this stuff often have a difficult time teasing apart things that are made by humans and things that are made by AI. So my big question kind of overriding all these projects, and I'm sure will take me into future projects in subsequent semesters, is really what is the ethical limitations of this technology when we apply it to the human-facing security tasks, right? Do we want to have a world where most companies just kind of fire all their security trainers because whatever, we can just hire a kid who can talk to ChatGPT and they'll make something that's good enough, and then we can give it to our employees and we can check off whatever, auditing boxes that we check off by giving, security awareness training to our employees. That's really kind of what drives me. What is the limit there? Where do humans play a role in this? Where should they play a role in this? And also, where should AI and where does AI play a role in all these human-facing security questions?
So to build on that, something that drove me to really dive deeper into during this project was an article about the risks that ChatGPT faces to security. And this article basically just talked about how people are using ChatGPT and other generative AI to enhance their phishing scams through the language models, the grammar models, and whatnot. So I really wanted to look into how we could use it on the other side to defend these new and enhanced phishing scams.
Adding on to that, one article that I found interesting was, so what if ChatGPT wrote it? And one part that I found really interesting was that as the future does come, AI is going to play a big important role. So one curiosity that I did have was, how will AI affect security awareness training in the future?
And then for me, raise your hand if you're working in security and actively using AI for some part of what you do. Yeah, there's a lot of us, and I imagine that's only going to increase over time, right? At a bare minimum, any of us who is doing log analysis probably very heavily depends on all of our SIM systems to ingest all those logs and actually present to us the patterns that it finds, right? And then we can talk about how good it is at that and maybe improvements to that, improvements on the human side of actually making the final call. But did you know that SANS actually has a yearly awareness training conference? I did not know this. I think it was new. I think last year was their first one. And I was looking through the videos, and they had a video. I'm going to blank on her name, but I'm pretty sure she works as a reporter specifically in the security sector. And her talk was set up about how ChatGPT can both help and hurt security and awareness training. And I thought, this is great. This is a video that's going to tell me everything I need to research for this year, and I'll be good. And she effectively just ignored the security training part of her title, except for like one sentence where she was like, yeah, don't use it because it's not going to know your policies, and then they're not going to know your policies, and whatever, don't use it. And that seemed really unsatisfying, right? Really kind of disappointing. If we think about like just how much we are using AI and how much we will continue to use AI, not just in security, but in a whole host of different arenas, I think it makes sense that we don't forget about things that might seem obvious to us. And I think for a lot of people, security awareness training might just seem obvious because we all do it. A lot of us kind of have to do it. But there are still really important lessons, I feel, that we can learn from pushing the bounds of what AI should be expected or could be expected to do for these kinds of tasks.
Okay, so we all came into this project at the beginning of the semester to continue the previous project that we had already discussed, but we all had a bunch of big questions that we had to then narrow down to create something that we could really work on. And some of the ones that I want to talk about briefly are the idea of bias, either human or AI bias. Where are they preferable and how and in what ways? And to build on that, what are the risks and rewards of allowing generative AI to do things, knowing that they have biases and knowing that we're not entirely sure where those biases lie? And another thing that we will discuss a little bit later on is the sense of accountability, and in what way does accountability come into play with both human-generated trainings or AI-generated trainings? And then we narrowed that down to how can we train security professionals to administer better prompts to an AI to create a more realistic security training? And the sub-questions to that were that, do these security professionals need to be prompt engineers in order to engineer a good generative AI security training? Or on the other hand, do people only need prompt engineering skills with a lack of security training? And how we adapted to that. And it might seem obvious that the trainers do need security skills, but sometimes what seems obvious ends up being not so true. So we really took our time to explore these questions to further design the project.
So when it came to designing our experiment, we identified experts in cybersecurity, prompt engineering, and some people who had both, so like a dual expert. We provided each of these experts the same instructions to create cybersecurity awareness training, and they used ChatGPT to do so. We then gave these training to members of the RPI community, and both the training makers and training takers, they took pre and post tests. And for training makers to understand their experiences with ChatGPT, and then for training takers to see if they believed their knowledge and skills were improved.
Okay, so from that we concluded that there would be no difference in the quality of training between generative AI-aided cybersecurity awareness training created by those with security knowledge but no prompt engineering skills, prompt engineering knowledge but no security knowledge, and those with both security and prompt engineering knowledge. So to actually run this experiment, we had 3 training makers, 1 purely prompt engineering skills, 1 purely security expert, and 1 with both. And then we had 24 total takers of these trainings. And they were only split between the prompt engineers and the dual experts trainings because the security experts training was not eligible to give to people.
So there were some similarities between how the different training makers reacted as they were creating their trainings. The prompt engineer was surprised that ChatGPT made jokes. The dual expert was surprised ChatGPT was able to correctly identify and use RPI security policy, which, thinking back on it, with the article that was mentioned, with the article the SANS video said something about the policies not being there. So it was quite a surprise to see that ChatGPT actually does have the policies for RPI. So now, on other similarities between the training makers, they all discussed the need to continually prompt ChatGPT with more specific prompts. It didn't start initially perfect from the first go. They had to keep refining it. They also all thought that ChatGPT is good for efficiency in making the training. There were some differences too, like the prompt engineer was giving ChatGPT free rein to discuss additional topics rather than the main topic of phishing that we decided the training would be on. The security expert was the only one to discuss making the ChatGPT output sound human, and the dual expert was the only one to discuss looking for RPI-specific tools, policies, websites, etc. The dual expert also found that it was difficult to combine the best refined outputs into a single one by just prompting ChatGPT to do it.
So I really like this slide. They disagreed as to whether or not their training was ready to give to others. And it might surprise you who the one who thought it was okay to give it to. So the prompt engineer and the security expert, they both kind of reported to us in different ways that either they wish they had more time, or they wish they had more skills, or they wish there was something they could get out of the AI that they didn't get in their training. So we actually, in the instructions that we gave to our training makers, told them they were not allowed to edit the outputs in any way. If they wanted a different output, they would have to prompt the AI for the changes to that output. Now, you can cheat at this. If any of you have ever used ChatGPT, you can be like, hey, ChatGPT, write me this sentence, word for word, and stick it here. And it will do that, right? So you can cheat at this. And I suppose I don't actually know if they cheated on it in this way. I suspect that they probably didn't, because everyone kind of lamented the difficulty of tailoring to be exactly what was wanted. What I thought was interesting in the prompt engineer actually felt like they were getting better at security by doing this task. And I think as a result of them feeling that they got better, they began to realize how much that they actually did not know about all these materials that we were then going to very seriously turn around and give to other people as, you know, serious cybersecurity awareness training. And I think that realization kind of hit them, which I thought was very interesting. And even the security expert, right, the person who had no prompt engineering experience at all, had mentioned that they would not be comfortable giving their training as is unless another human had actually come and vetted it. You can imagine someone who might know a little bit about a topic might feel, let's say, unsure about whether or not they hit all the points that they needed to, right? Sometimes we kind of defer our own expertise a little bit. The dual expert's the one who's like, yeah, this is fine, just give it to them. Like, everything is good to go. One thing that we all did as a group, once we got back that training, we actually did go through them. We didn't actually tell them we were going through them, but we actually did go through them and spot errors, and we had errata documents ready to go. So anyone who took one of these trainings that had mistakes in them, as soon as they were done taking the training and finishing the experiment, we would give them that errata document, so they would actually leave with only correct information, right? We did not want to have people walk away believing that either bad advice, things that are not best practices, or things that are just straight up wrong were actually true. So that the people who made the training did not know that, but we were actually doing that in the background because we also had these very same fears, right? We don't want people leaving worse off than when they came to us. But the person who was the dual expert, despite poring over that thing, we actually couldn't find anything to correct. So that dual expert was actually correct in their assessment that their training was ready to go, which I thought was quite interesting. Although they did kind of temper that with an introductory level audience, right? Perhaps not people who are real experts in security, although that was not really our goal with our training. However, so the way that the trainings worked is we told everyone, create about 10 to 15 minute scenario, right? Create a story about 10 to 15 minutes long that covered as many different aspects of anti-phishing as you can. We specifically stuck with phishing because at RPI, phishing is probably our #1 problem. We do get phishing attacks all the time, as I imagine any university probably does. And even with RPI implementing two-factor authentication, we use Duo at RPI. Even with that, right, no system is foolproof, as we all know. We still do have times where faculty, staff, and students do get their accounts compromised. So we do find a real need to kind of constantly remind people about protecting themselves against phishing. We've made a couple of really good strides in recent months. We now no longer have to manually forward our phishing emails. You can just click a button in Outlook now, much better. We have a fishbowl now so people can check to see what the latest kind of campus-wide phishing attacks are before they make a decision on whatever emails that they get. So we have come a long way. Actually, very humorously as an aside, this morning we have a thing called Morning Mail. It's like a campus-wide email blast that everyone gets. Just this morning, .cio announced that we will all be taking cybersecurity awareness training, which is the first at RPI. The whole campus community will finally be doing cybersecurity awareness. I used to ask them in class, you know, what did RPI give you in terms of security awareness training? They would laugh at me. So it's good to see these changes actually being made. So they made this 10 to 15 minute scenario, and then after that 10 to 15 minute scenario, we asked them to make multiple choice questions, about 10 multiple choice questions, and to also generate an answer key. And then as the people who took the tests or took the trainings, they would take the test, we'd record their answers to make sure that they were actually learning what they should be learning. Is that still me or is it someone else? Still me? Okay. They're gonna let me know when I should shut up, so I'll just keep talking until they tell me to stop. A thing that we really wanted to know about the people who are making the trainings is if they prefer to work solo or in a group. And we found kind of split answers on that as well. So the prompt engineer, perhaps honing in on the fact that prompt engineering is a skill in and of itself, felt that having more people work on this would only be helpful if everyone in that group was also well-trained in prompt engineering, which I thought was interesting. Both the security expert and the dual expert felt that a small group would improve the training, whether or not they were trained in prompt engineering. The dual expert very specifically had mentioned that other people bring other expertises that that person might lack. The security expert kind of hinted at it, didn't say it in quite a full-throated statement quite as the dual expert did, but they were both pointing at this idea that we probably do need at least a couple of people working on these human-facing tasks, if for no other reason to make sure that we are not missing something critically important in the trainings that we ultimately produce and then give to people. Is this still me?
It says all of us.
All of us?
Mm-hmm.
All right, someone else talk then.
I'll take it.
So over the course of the 3 weeks, we gave the trainings to as many people as we could. So one way we did this was through morning mail. So it's an email blast that gets sent out to the community every morning around 8:30. We also did announcements on departmental Discord servers and mailing lists. So our ITWS department has their own Discord server. So we sent out a ping over there to make sure that if they did want to come, they could. And we also engaged with our friends and peers.
Yeah, you ever wish that you had taken pictures of things, but only after that thing had already come and gone. Like, that's how I feel about, like, we had 3 weeks of this training. So we sat, any of you are familiar with RPI might be familiar with the student union. That's kind of the big building that all the students hang out at. So we sat in kind of the main room in the union for about 2 hours on 3 consecutive Wednesdays with little signs that said free cybersecurity awareness training. And whoever came by, they got whoever was free and available, and they sat through the training. Training took about, I guess on the quicker side, probably about 15 minutes. On the longer side, probably about 20 minutes, because you got to think, this is still human subject research. So they did have to sign an IRB to make sure that we were getting informed consent before we got started. They did take that pre-test. That pre-test had a number of kind of 5-point Likert scale questions. You know, they kind of picked how they self-identified their skills in a number of different things from 1 to 5, where 1 was the worst and 5 was the best. And then we also gave some open-ended questions. We'll kind of talk about their feelings about the open-ended questions in a little bit. Then they took the training, so figured the training is between 10 and 15 minutes. They're gonna answer the multiple choice questions. They then took a post-test so we can see if they felt that they had improved or gotten worse in any of these things. And then if there was an errata document that we needed to give them, we had to give them that. So for most people, this took about 20 minutes. Like we mentioned before, we ended up getting about 24 people over the course of the 3 weeks. We are hopeful that we'll get more people over time. It's always good to have more people. But I was kind of surprised in the makeup of who actually showed up. Very early on, I was getting emails from staff and faculty members saying, do I have to be there for the whole 2 hours, or can I come for only a little bit? Is this a lecture, or is it one-on-one? So we did get staff, we did get faculty, and we did get students. And that was kind of our goal, right? RPI not having robust campus-wide cybersecurity awareness training, we did try to devise these trainings in a way that no matter who you were on campus, you would get something useful and meaningful out of it. Any of you want to talk about your experiences giving the training? No? Okay. I figured I'd ask.
So when it came to analyzing the data and results from a statistics point of view, we ran a pair t-test on each of our pre and post-test pairings for each of the 5-point Likert scale questions for across all training takers. So first we ran a Shapiro-Wilk normality test to determine if the sample came from a normally distributed population. And if that test had a p-value of greater than 0.05, we continued on with the pair t-test. If the pair t-test had a p-value of less than 0.05, we considered a statistically significant result.
So we found that detecting phishing, recognizing social engineering attacks were the two results that we consider statistically significant. For the prompt engineers training alone, we had detecting phishing, cyber threats, recognizing social engineering attacks, and the RPI security policy appear as statistically significant. And for the dual experts training, it was only detecting phishing.
Yeah, so just to contextualize a little bit, so that means for all of these bullet points, we found that our population considered themselves to be statistically significantly better after having done the training than before having done the training.
There was also one that was, well, some were pretty close. So we'll keep an eye on those as we do more trainings. But for now, the closest one was password security for the prompt engineers training. So here we have the charts showing after they took the training and before, and comparing where the average was and the scale. As you can see, there was definitely that growth in the post training for detecting phishing and recognizing social engineering attacks.
Yeah. And I apologize, I am not a statistician. I don't know why the post-test is before the pre-test, but just read them back. Read them from right to left. Does everyone understand what the box plots are trying to tell us? It's okay if no, because I'll have one of these two explain it. They took stats last semester. No, they don't want to explain it? So the black line in the middle of the box is going to be whatever our median is, and then it's 25% above, 25% below quartiles, and then further out on both sides as well. And the little dots on the bottom right one would be outliers that we had. So sometimes we had outliers, not always. So you can see that in these charts at least, we are coalescing around a new median point that is statistically significant from the original median point. That's what these charts are trying to tell us.
So then for the prompt engineering only, we have the cyber threats, which just moves up like 1 point for the average and the range. We have the detecting phishing, which also was significantly higher. So yeah, all of them really showed an increase in their perception of their understanding. And then for the dual expert, it was it was also a significant increase in their understanding of detecting phishing.
So here are some of the interesting taker comments. So we learned more about how our takers thought about the training through open-ended questions. So takers were split between whether or not they thought generative AI had a hand in making the trainings or not, and they universally thought that there was no bad advice in these trainings, but they were divided as to if they thought they were better equipped to follow RPI security policy. However, most takers believed that they were able to make better decisions in their own lives, and takers were nearly universal in agreement that it would be good if others also took the training. Adding on to that, they were also mostly indifferent as to whether the training was made by humans or AI. One, on being made without the use of generative AI, someone said, I would feel indifferent. But on others being made solely by generative AI, they said, I would not be surprised because seemingly everything is made by AI now. It would also be entirely believable. AI did a nice job, nice outsourcing for the human. But also note these quotes in the opposite direction were that I would not feel strongly about this, as this hopefully is the norm with cybersecurity trainings being made by cybersecurity professional, and someone also quoted that that's normal. However, some takers expressed concern and or excitement about AI-generated trainings. So suspicious, I would feel scared. I would feel somewhat skeptical if I learned that this training was made by an AI. I think it's kind of ironic because the whole training was to show the dangers of trusting random sources. So a random source can be classified as AI. And I would be excited to see how much and how far AI could teach, as I found the information before questions to be a great baseline.
So in just 2 months, we have tentative evidence that generative AI, such as ChatGPT, can be a worthwhile tool to help develop security awareness training. And it does come with risks. And I want to talk a little bit about the sense of accountability here, in the sense that if you're an employer providing your employees with security awareness training, you're going to feel accountable and responsible for their actions after that training, whereas an AI might not feel any sense of accountability and might frankly just not care what that person then goes and does with that training. So that is a really important thing to take away from allowing an AI to take the roles of a human. And some other risks with this are that not all people are so welcoming to taking trainings made by AIs, which we saw in the comments that we got about ours, and that it was really important to go through the trainings and find the mistakes that the AI made, because if you're giving a training, none of the information should be incorrect, and the AI did make a few mistakes throughout mostly the prompt engineers training, but frankly all of them except for the dual security and prompt engineering expert. And so far we can't prove or disprove our hypothesis. We would need more people to take the trainings, but once we do have more people take the trainings, we can make more directed commentaries about if prompt engineering is a skill that your security trainers need. And we can make more refined conclusions about the strengths of each approach and be able to give specific recommendations as to how to maximize the efforts of your training makers. But the fact that we do already have statistically significant results implies that AI is a tool that will likely be a strong thing to use to create security awareness trainings, even if it's just a piece of it that speeds up the process.
So more future work. It is always good to create more trainings, right? So we only had 3, one from a prompt engineer, one from a security expert, and one who is an expert in both. My fear is that the takeaway from all this is we don't actually need security people, because if we scroll all the way back, the person who did the best was the prompt engineer who didn't know anything about security, or at least the people who took their trainings thought that they did the best, right? So there's a difference between thinking that you are better at something and actually being better at something. So it might be the case that that prompt engineer, which is very, very good at crafting a really engaging story with a set of questions at the end that made people reflect on that story and have them walk away feeling as if they were better at protecting themselves. But of course, some of that training was flat out incorrect. And so we did have to give those errata to everyone who took the prompt engineer's training. But if we're going solely by self-reporting, the prompt engineer did the best, right? And this is my worry, by the way. When I'm talking about, right, that ethical limitations, the thing that is driving me, this is my exact worry, that businesses begin to say, well, then what is the point of having people who are specifically trained in security going out to our employees and designing training, developing training, giving that training, getting feedback from our employees, iterating on that training. If we can just give it to a prompt engineer and everyone's gonna feel better than if the security person did it, right? That is something to be aware of. I don't know if I'm willing to say it's something to be scared of, but it is something to be aware of. And so something that I would like to do going forward is to just find more of these people, create more trainings, and see if this is like truly a one-off, and this one person, maybe they were just a superstar at designing this particular story and training, or if it's a trend that we end up seeing across a broad variety of people who are just prompt engineers without security training, people who are just security engineers without the prompt engineering training, and people who are both. The reason we ultimately ended up not being able to give the security experts training is because despite the fact that he told us the instructions were clear and he followed them, he in fact did not follow the instructions and did not come up with questions and answers. So we had no way of gauging if people were actually learning from the training. So unfortunately we had to discard it. That was a little more than a little wrench in our situation. So future work, we will define some more people who are security experts who are not prompt engineers, get trainings from them that we can compare to these other groups, and then figure out, right, what all this data is telling us. Of course, the more people who make trainings, the more people who take trainings will be able to make more nuanced recommendations about different skills. And again, I really like the note from the prompt engineer. They really did feel like they were learning cybersecurity through doing cybersecurity. And you probably don't need a cybersecurity professor to tell you that a really great way to learn cybersecurity is to do some of it, right? You know, we have CTFs and all those other things. However, that point I think is still interesting and salient and useful because it points to another really interesting potential future research project. Do people learn awareness training better sitting and taking a pre-made training or being made to do something? Right? Again, one of the things that I took away from this is even though it seems obvious to us that our people who make trainings and give trainings should be security experts, again, if you look at the data we have, the person who is an expert in just prompt engineering is so far the winner. So that really obvious thing that I felt for sure would obviously come true, that the security engineer and the person who is an expert in both would have more statistically significant results, at least for now, hasn't borne out. So Even though it might seem obvious to us, doing a hands-on activity versus a passive activity, one might be better than the other. I do think these are questions actually worth asking and answering, right? As security becomes a more important tenet to the average person's everyday life, we shouldn't be going on our gut feeling for the best way to get these insights to those everyday people, because we might be wrong. And us being wrong, as a lot of us already know, can have very serious consequences on the people who ultimately fall victim to one or more attacks, social engineering attacks, scams, etc. So I do think it's worth it for us as a community to actually question what we think is obvious and question what we think are those fundamental tenets of teaching the average person how to be more secure. And if we're wrong, change something. Now, I'm not going to say that we're wrong yet, and I'm not going to say I know what we should change it to, but I do believe it's worth asking these kinds of questions. Am I still talking, or what are you talking?
You're talking.
No, it's a,
No,
no, it is me. She's the next one. So I do think, as of now, and again, this research is still pretty young, and we do have quite a ways to go, but I do believe we have tentative reason to believe that if you're going to develop training in-house, or even refine training that you have purchased from somewhere else to tailor to your organization, actually going and giving your security people a formal, even if brief, education in prompt engineering is probably going to be worth your while. Every single one, all three of our training makers did talk about the benefits of having that tool. They almost universally couched it in efficiency, and we can talk about what efficiency actually means, and kind of the baggage that comes with efficiency. But nonetheless, they all walked away believing that tool in some way helped them. And so I think it is worth us thinking about formal training in prompt engineering if we're going to have trainers in our ranks and in our organizations. And believe it or not, people whose only job is to make and give cybersecurity training is one of the fastest growing subfields of the security field broadly. Just this past week, for those of you who like troll LinkedIn like I do, because I'm always looking for jobs and internships for my students, New York State just had 2 jobs posted at level 2 and level 3. So we're talking about upper early and mid. That is just about giving awareness training and nothing else. So these are jobs that are becoming popular jobs in large organizations for people to just be doing this kind of work. I want to make sure that those people have good jobs and they make good trainings. And if generative AI is one tool that helps get us there, let's get them trained in that thing. Let's get them out there so they can maximize the work that they are doing. Or if you think about the state, it's probably not just state employees, it's probably everyday people as well, right? They're probably gonna run campaigns about how to keep yourself more secure. You may or may not have seen posters, right? I don't know if New York State is doing them, but other states are beginning to like put out posters and other kinds of materials to their residents about steps you can take to be more secure online. These are the people who are making those materials. So I think it is worth it. And I don't think it's worth leaving it to chance. I think a formal, even like I said, even if brief education in prompt engineering is worthwhile here. If we leave it to chance, there's just too much of an opportunity for holes in their knowledge for this tool to crop up, and holes in their knowledge will lead to mistakes down the line that could be avoided, and I think they are worth avoiding. And again, I'll just take the security expert, right? The one whose training ultimately didn't follow our instructions. Despite the need, him saying that we need prompt engineering, he was ultimately not able to complete the task, at least not be able to complete the task in the way that we needed him to, and therefore did not produce a usable training. I also don't want those people getting those jobs to walk into a job where they are being handed these tools being told these tools are part of what we expect from you, and then of course, as we all do, giving them absolutely unreasonable deadlines and unreasonable amounts of work to actually do, and them not being able to make it. Not because they're not really good at security knowledge and not really good at teaching people their security knowledge, but because they didn't know how to leverage this tool to meet whatever quotas they need to meet, to make whatever deadlines it is that they needed to make. I do think this matters.
So I want to talk about accountability again. Before I talked about it in the sense that when you are giving a training to somebody, you might feel accountable for what they then do with that training. But there's also the sense of accountability for your own work if you're using ChatGPT or any other AI to do it, in the sense that there could be an issue with plagiarism. But what we learned from our training was that some of the people that took the training were not comfortable taking a training made purely by an AI. So that sense of accountability and a sense of transparency with the people that you are providing a training to, so that they do know that it is made with a generative AI. And only one of the trainings that we made did in fact get all of the RPI policies correct. So ensuring that you're accountable for the integrity of your own work, and it being all true information. And aside from specifically RPI policy, not all of the general advice that the AI gave was factually correct. So just a sense of accountability for yourself in addition to the people that you are giving the training to. And to build on that, my final takeaway was that I really wanted to dive deeper into the sense of accountability and the sense of bias between humans and AI, specifically for something like creating cybersecurity awareness training. And the idea of fishing out the biases from an AI was a little bit too difficult and too big of a project to do in one semester. So really focusing on the accountability side. And back to the article that I mentioned earlier about how people are using generative AI to enhance phishing attacks and other cyber threats. So I think that it is really important to work now to work on the defensive side of that and use this tool to better the defensive side as opposed to just letting people better their attacks with these AI tools.
So my final takeaway was that security awareness training on campus is essential as it educates students and staff on how to identify and mitigate potential cybersecurity risks. So as we mentioned earlier, I think in the fall they're starting the Precipio modules for cybersecurity training. When I entered RPI, we didn't really have a security module to take. We had other modules, but cybersecurity wasn't one of them. So as this does get introduced, I think it will play a prominent role in how cybersecurity is utilized.
For my key takeaway, I found, looking back at what the research we have done, ChatGPT is a very effective way of speeding up the process, but it should there still needs to be some review on it and making sure that all the data is, the integrity of the data is correct.
So for me, and one of the things I learned was really kind of an affirmation of something I had learned in the previous semester. In the absence of something, people will flock to anything. Cybersecurity awareness training is not some magical exception to the everyday psychology of people. Just the fact that we gave security awareness training at all, I mean, we could have told them anything. And I know that sounds scary, but we could have told them anything. People are desperate for this, right? In an organization that does not offer this, people are actually, at least we find at RPI, people want this stuff. They want to know how they should be protecting themselves and their communities and their organizations. It's kind of something I heard time and time again just chatting with people who took our trainings. They were kind of grateful that we were even doing this because they had never had an opportunity to stop for 15 minutes and be told, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that thing, or maybe, right, you should exercise more caution before you click on something, or you believe an email that you read. If we wait to use this tool, other people are going to use this tool to start making mis- and disinformation cybersecurity awareness training. And that's going to be what disseminates to the average person. And that's the thing I'm really afraid of. And that's kind of what keeps me going, and apparently gets me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, answering student text messages, which I did last night. So we will report back when we learn more. This is an ongoing project. But thank you all. Hopefully this was interesting and you have some new things to think about and take back with you in regarding whatever your organizations do in terms of security awareness training. You can connect with us. I can also give you like my socials if you want. We will take questions if people have questions. Yes?
So definitely interesting, and definitely interested to hear how this goes as you get a larger sample of trainers. So 2 questions, and both kind of silly, but something when you mentioned putting up a table for free cybersecurity training, maybe this is a study on its own, but how many people ran to the other side of the hallway and avoided you with that?
So I have actually a great story for you for that. Not this time. In the previous semester when I worked with the MBA students. The answer to your question is, if they were my students, they turned around and ran the other way. There was one point I was sitting at a table and I had looked over to my left, and it's a pretty big room. If any of you are familiar with the McNeil room where the Panera Bread is in the Union, it's a rather large room. I look all the way to my left and I see 2 of my students in my class sitting at the table, and they're kind of looking at me, hoping that I'm not looking at them. So we use Discord within the ITWS program for all of our classes. I sent them a DM on Discord going, I can see the 2 of you. Guess what you're both doing? Get up, walk over here, and take training. I wasn't really looking out for how many people are turning and walking away, but I do have more people interacting with us than I thought we would at the notion of free cybersecurity awareness
So people
training.
actually were interested. That's good.
Yes.
So the second question, you mentioned that having to make corrections to some of these trainings. What kind of things actually did come out wrong? Were there some good examples that you want to share?
The biggest one was probably the cybersecurity policy at RPI. It did not, for the prompt engineers training, it did not seem to be specific for RPI. So because of that, it was missing that.
Because the RPI policy isn't publicly accessible to the
Yeah, well, so here's the thing about that, which is actually very interesting. The person who was the dual expert specifically said, give me RPI's policy, and it quite literally, verbatim, not only spit out the correct policy, but found the correct websites that you could go to read the policies, which was actually really quite interesting. Sometimes the AI gets caught up on current best practices in terms of identifying phishing emails. Like it'll say things like, phishing emails will always have poor spelling and grammar, and that is traditionally kind of what we tend to point to as one of the telltale signs. But as more and more adversaries are using AI to write these emails, that is beginning to come less and less true. Actually, a good example that we had here at RPI, like they're now sending out emails about like FAFSAs, and like your FAFSA has been, and it at least in terms of like the spelling and grammar and structure of the email, like they're pretty good. So it's like things like that, kind of like around the edges, and then the policy, if you don't really kind of hone in on like, give me that policy, go find that policy, it kind of just makes something up. So the one we had done last semester, so RPI's policy last semester was really short. You get a phishing email, you forward it to a particular email address, it's itssc@support.rpi.edu, change the subject line to potential spam phishing because that triggers their ticketing system, and you're done. And they'll get back to you with whatever they've learned. But we told ChatGPT to just make up a policy because, again, we were trying to figure out if people would even notice. And it generated this really long-winded policy about, make sure to read the email, then go to this really particular website that did not exist and see if RPI already knows about it. And then if they don't, RPI's email address is definitely abuse@rpi.edu, which is not a real email address at RPI. And it kind of kept going on and on and on, and then delete the email. Things that are not necessarily generically bad, they're just not what we do at RPI. And again, we had people who literally worked at .cio look at that and say, yeah, that's our policy. So it's things like that. And again, that SANS video did kind of flippantly, but did kind of say, it will get your policy wrong, so don't bother with this tool. But I think the real answer is quite a bit more nuanced.
What was the format the training was provided in?
So in our instructions, we had specified to, like we said before, only prompt the AI, and then have the AI prompt a set of questions and an answer key at the bottom. So it was essentially like a long scenario. However, each person that made the training interpreted that long scenario to give like instructions about what a phishing attack is and how to recognize it with the RPI policies, followed by a series of 10 multiple choice questions and an answer key to those 10 multiple choice questions. So we also went through and reviewed and made sure that the answers to those multiple choice questions seemed adequate, because we then recorded all of the answers of those multiple choice questions to see how people did relative to what the AI expected them to have done.
So it was like a text document, basically?
Yeah.
So whenever I hear about AI, it's usually ChatGPT, or there's a couple other I've heard of. But so I was just wondering if you all like went through a selection process for like picking which AI to go with, and if so, like why you went with ChatGPT, and like what are some differences between some other AI tools?
Do you want to know the honest answer to that question?
Yeah.
The four of us were already paying for ChatGPT 4, so we figured we might as well use what we're paying for. So when we started, Google had not yet renamed Bard to Gemini, which is the current name. And I think with that name change, they also had changed maybe not the way that Gemini worked, but kind of what you could get out of Gemini. Because when it was Bard, I think it was really hesitant to give things like code. I think it's less hesitant these days. And that would have kind of put an odd kind of asterisk in what we were doing, because that change happened mid-project. So ChatGPT was kind of just the stable option as well, that we knew would at least be in whatever form it is, at least for this semester from start to finish. So really kind of less of an interesting answer, but more of just a practical, we needed something that would be stable, and that was going to be the answer.
And you're paying for that.
And we're paying for it, so like I said, we might as well use what we pay for. Was there a second part to your question?
No, I don't think so. I was just
Okay.
saying, like why you went with ChatGPT, or like what are some differences between like some other AI?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in the differences between all the different AIs, but as I understand it, ChatGPT is built to be the most generic of them all. So it tries to be good at everything, and it will plug into other GPTs and other AI. So if, for example, if you ask ChatGPT to draw you something, it can't draw you anything, but it can talk to DALL-E, and DALL-E can draw you something. So it also has a lot of just plugins to a lot of different things. So it ends up kind of being just the most generic option these days. I'm sure Google and Apple and all the others will do their best to catch up, but I found that these days it's kind of the best at doing the most, where there are probably asterisks all over the place. But we found it plenty good for what we were looking for. They're all great at text, so I don't think we'd see a huge difference for what we were using it for. Yes?
So to determine the results, you looked at the self-assessment. Was that the?
Yes. So one of the things we promised. So this does count as human subject research. So we did have to go through an IRB process. We did have to actually give everyone who took or made a training a form that they could read and sign away all their rights and all that stuff. When I first developed this project with the MBA student, because we were very specifically looking at the question of, can humans even tell the difference between what's made by a human and what was made by an AI, I tacked on the sentence, "You will not be given a follow-up," which has stuck with the protocol to this day. So we actually can't follow up with the people who take the trainings and give them subsequent trainings. So while I might love to give them a test, have them go away for a week, give them another test, and kind of measure something more like an actual exam, that is just out of the scope of our protocol, which leaves self-assessment. But I still think self-assessment is useful for the questions that I'm getting at. But you are right, having something more formal probably would help elucidate other questions and answers.
I don't know a ton about the large language models, but it seems like they're very good at making believable output.
Correct.
So like, is it convincing, is the sum of the data, especially the prompt engineer when doing so well, is it just the most believable, like I believe this and my score therefore gets higher?
Yes.
Is there, in future research, what other kind of assessments could you look at? Could you go fish these people yourselves?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question. I actually have asked RPI if I can go fish people, and legal says no, I cannot do that. I have thought about that because, yes, that would be a really interesting and useful thing to know. I have not given up on that approach yet.
Maybe with the captive audience.
Yeah, I just have to figure out how to do it in a way that makes legal happy. But I also think that there's probably good follow-up questions, not just in believability, but also in what is phishing knowledge? What phishing knowledge is retained by people? So I do think that kind of longer term actually give them something more of an exam format that actually measures skills and knowledge is something that I want to get at. I just need to either amend my current protocol or make a new protocol. And unfortunately, those things take time. Yeah, in retrospect, I kind of wish I hadn't tacked on that sentence. But as they say, hindsight is 20/20. And the good news is, I'm still young. I got a whole long career at RPI. I can go torture people with cybersecurity awareness training and other experiments for like probably another 30, 35 years. So I'm good.
Yeah, the nice thing is your population changes every 4 or 5 years.
Yes, and we do kind of have changing population. That is both good and bad, right? You can't do longitudinal studies when your population changes, but you can learn about how baselines shift over time with changing population. So there are pros and cons to that. Yes?
So when you're comparing like the security engineering prompt with security, was it that they might have had less to learn versus the prompt engineer?
Oh, you're talking about, so in terms of kind of refining the output, that perhaps the prompt engineer had more to learn and therefore every time they learned something new, that triggered a new prompt from them. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, I think more from like what you have for your scoring where you said, made it sound like the prompt engineer learned, like had the best score overall. Was it more that they had more to learn versus the security engineer?
Oh, I see. So here when we're talking about kind of the prompt engineer doing the best, we're talking about how the population of the people who took their training. So these are all our results having given the training to our populace at RPI. So the prompt engineer had 4, so I think we had 7 or 8 1 to 5 Likert scale prompts, and the prompt engineer, their population had 4 things returned statistically significant in an upward tick. The population as a whole only had 2. The dual expert only had 1. And that leaves just a whole bunch of really fascinating questions about, right, why is it that the dual expert only had their population have a statistically significant increase in self-identification, self-reporting in one of these areas where the prompt engineer had 4? Wonderful question that if I had another year or 2, I'll come back, I'll tell you. I mean, I do have another year or 2, but I'll come back in another year or 2 and I'll let you know. So, just keep that in your head. Don't forget it. I'll be back. You'll see me in a year or so, and then you can ask me that question. I'll have a better answer. Well, I'd like to think I have pretty good job security. I like to think that they have pretty good job security. I mean, they're all smarter than I am, so I'd like to think that they have good job security. Um, you're right. I could just be an AI next year. In that case, the AI can give my presentation. You know how much easier it would be if the AI had to give my presentation? I could just hang out with all of you. That'd be great. Yes?
So what defines a prompt engineer?
Yeah, what defines a prompt engineer?
So for this, we had everybody self-identify for this. So the prompt engineer that created the training self-identified as a prompt engineer. But essentially what that meant to them was just that they had spent a lot of time using ChatGPT and really trying to, I guess, manipulate the data that it produces to exactly what they wanted it to be. And before this experiment, it had been for other circumstances, whatever that may be, whether it was classwork or applying to jobs or things like that. But everything was self-identified, so we didn't quite classify what that meant. But then we had the prompt engineer that stepped up as a prompt engineer explain why they felt that way. And it was basically just having spent a lot of time using ChatGPT and really figuring out how to prompt it to get exactly what you want, as opposed to just prompting it to get a response. And then since they had self-identified, that was good enough for us.
But I do like the question that you're drawing on, right? Because I was actually just having this conversation yesterday. There's really kind of two ways we can interpret that phrase, prompt engineer, right? It can be on the human side, where a person is learning to manipulate the technology to get out of it what they want, which is what our prompt engineer and what we were actually looking for. But the other way you can look at that is the people who are making this technology. How are they engineering the technology to get the best results out of even average or below average prompts? That is not the direction that we were looking for. We were looking at for the first one, which I think is what usually most people tend to think about when they think about prompt engineering in the space these days. Anyone else? If not, we've been talking to you for like an hour-ish, so like, yes?
Do you think that people that were taking the training felt that they wanted to learn more about RPI's policy or more about
Do you all know? Because I know the answer to this question. It's actually in our results. So we actually did ask people, everyone who took a training, our very last open-ended question to them was, is there anything you wish you would have learned that you did not learn? And almost universally, people were not actually interested in learning more about, at least they didn't say they were interested in learning about RPI's policy. But we did have a number of people point out different aspects of their individual digital lives that they felt like they could have used more training on. One person brought up, really interestingly, what should I do if I accidentally or inadvertently fall victim to something? The training didn't talk about that. Another one talked about like how could I use like YubiKeys and other devices for a little bit extra security? The training didn't talk about that. Another person had asked, I think it was about like, I forget if it was Outlook itself or some automated tool that they could use to kind of pre-notice phishing for them, which we actually do have systems at RPI that help with that. Like we have to do like external banners if it's not an @rpi.edu email address. So there were people who did want more, but it was almost always about what they can do in their own personal lives and not actually about RPI's policy, which I thought was interesting because most people thought that they were no better equipped to follow RPI's policy, despite that some had literally gotten RPI's policy. But most of them felt like they were better equipped in their daily lives. So maybe it's a question of they were already feeling better about being more protective of their personal lives. What could they do next, right? Because they were already kind of primed to think in that direction. Or I guess any other number of explanations. But yes, we did ask that question. That's kind of what we learned from that question. I mean, if not, when we turn the stream off, we can all just chat. We can mingle, we can chat. I don't have to go home. I'm a grown-up. I can go home whenever I want. Like I said, thank you for coming out and listening to us and talk about us. I enjoy doing this stuff. I love making them come out and do this stuff. So